What is up, theology nerds? This is Trip, and I'm right here with the BoDaddy,
Yeah, you are.
and we just got back from Theology Beer Camp, and this year,
Yeah, we did.
this year's Bo's first time being there, so boom.
That is the appropriate stinger.
Ooh, well, I like to give you a stinger every once in a while. Purely platonic stinger.
Yeah.
Your first time? Come on, Bo.
It was magnificent. Trip, I honestly cannot believe what that thing has become from its humble beginnings in Southern California, which was like a small gathering at, a church in the Bay Area, South Bay. And then it has become, I have so much feedback for you.
Ooh.
I can't wait to tell you about my experience. And then I also want to hear from you how it was different from previous incarnations.
Yeah. No, I think this would be fun, and you can kind of, you can drive. I'm sure.
Okay.
I'll have plenty of things I feel like interrupting and saying, which is one of my love languages for you. But no, I like a couple years ago, it was like the moment I talked you into coming back on the podcast for the big anniversary.
Yeah.
Then we started doing some TNT episodes, and I'm just like, Bo, you got to come to Theology Beer Camp. It's like basically what I like doing when I hang out with my friends, but with hundreds of them.
No, and that cannot be understated how many people were there. I mean, it was electric. So I've been thinking about, because I knew we were going to debrief it, and my feedback I'm going to break down into 3 categories. Okay.
All right.
The first is the sheer number of things going on at the same time was both impressive and intimidating. So it was impossible to be in every place at the same time. So it was magnificent as you walked around, like, say, the 5 different spaces. So, in the main stage, in the big sanctuary, were some headliners and some really fun activities, which I can talk about in a minute. Then you had a theology nerd stage, which was a little more cerebral but equally as electric. But if you didn't want to hear people talk, you could go to, a contemplative space. There was, like, with arts and stuff, you could go outside and sit in a solidarity circle. There was the geek area downstairs where they are having like a D&D campaign. And I dropped in there for a while, and I witnessed a cleric kicking, no, what was it called? Hold on. It was the funniest thing. The paladin got kicked in the face by a cleric and knocked out of the game. So I go to chat with them for a little bit. Keep in mind, I know nothing about D&D, and I just went down just to see what the geeks area was like.
Mm-hmm.
So I would drop into, the arts space and the different spaces. If you didn't want to go to any of those things, you could just sit down where the refreshments were and just schmooze and network. It was really amazing. And I tried to drop in on as many things as I could. And, but it was impossible to be in every place at the same time. So, like, for instance, there was a famous theologian that you had brought in, and
A few of them.
Yes, there were many of them. But, like, I got to see Diana Butler Bass, Grace Ji-Sun Kim, Brian McLaren, Jorg Rieger, but the one, Ilya,
Mm-hmm.
I never heard a single word she said. I just happened to be in my selection of the 5 choices that you have in any given period. I just happened to never be in the space that she was in. And so, like, I know that she talked with John Tatamino about multiple belongings. And I know that there were so many things but it was impossible to be in every place all the time. And so that's both a blessing and a curse. The blessing was there was no reason to ever complain. If you if you aren't gelling with what's happening in one space, just go to a different space. But also, if you have FOMO, I mean, it's a nightmare because you cannot be in all those places at once. It's wild.
Yeah, we sent a survey out for everyone that came, and it was funny. Like someone left a note and was just like, "Well, I came because I listened to Homebrewed all the time, but I knew all the places Trip was doing stuff was being recorded, so I skipped them all, and I hope they end up on the internet." And I was like,
Oh, that's
and
funny.
so
That's a good strategy.
all the stuff that happens on the main stage, those are all videotaped with multiple cameras and already on the, those are all there. And then obviously we recorded all the geek stage and the theology nerd stage, including the session you ran on the future of liberation theology. So
Yeah,
which people will get to hear very, very soon.
good.
So yeah, it's fun. And part of the reason of having those different stage options and knowing it's going to be recorded is like the event is essentially like the giant community of all the people that listen to the podcast and the other podcasters that are there and such. So, one of the goals in structuring with lots of options and then plenty of like, I don't know what you call it, like the cream of the Oreo is all the hangout opportunities in it.
Yeah, in between.
And so I think if what goes well, like a third of the time you are skipping something because you met a new friend or haven't seen someone since last year and that kind of thing. Now there are a lot of people there that came up to me going, "I've never met the BoDaddy before." So
I got to meet, so this is my second takeaway. Connecting with old friends and meeting new friends is absolutely like a dream. So for instance, I've known Grace and York for 12, 15 years, right? But I had never met Adam Clark before. He was coming into the homebrewed community in 2016 when I left to go up to Portland. And so I actually knew that you were in conversation with him. I had actually seen the first interview you did with him come into the pipeline to be edited for later release, but I'd never met him before. And so him and I became quick friends. We hung out every time. Like I've spent probably more time with him than anyone else. He was just a delight, just so gracious and kind. But I bumped into some people that, for instance, a guy named Ron was there from Alabama. He had played intramural football with my father in 1976.
wow.
In Toccoa Falls, Georgia, at the Bible college where my parents were training for ministry. And he came up and introduced himself and told me stories about my dad in college life, and I was only like 2 years old when we moved to Georgia from Ohio. And to talk to somebody who knew my dad was just, amazing. But the fact that he's in the homebrewed community, right? And then Dwight Friesen came up, who's an old friend of mine. He was actually one of my youth leaders when I was in a high schooler in Saskatchewan, Canada. And he knew my dad because he went to the Bible college, Canadian Bible College. My father was a professor at Canadian Theological Seminary. So he comes up to me and I said, "Hey, Dwight." And he says, "I'm so sorry to hear about your father." And I put my hand over my heart to say, like, "Thank you." And he grabs my forearm and says, "He was a great man." And like to connect with people who go back 40, 50 years, was incredible. But I met all sorts of new people too like Adam and April and Tim from the New Evangelicals, like the breakout session that they did on the main stage, and they brought clips. I love the experimental things that people tried, like when you guys did the Emergent game show. And
I was just glad I didn't lose. I was worried. I thought they planned that whole thing without me because Tony and Josh went to Tony's cabin and doing some stuff, and they planned this. And they were like, "Well, then Trip can play because he didn't know any of it." And I thought, I'm worried Tony's really lightened up. I thought he would only pick questions he knew I didn't know the answer to just to humiliate me. And it was nice to not have that happen.
So I got to talk with Brian McLaren, between sessions, and he's always so wonderful. And Diana Butler Bass and I had time to reminisce about the time I brought her in for a live homebrewed event at what would become the Loft LA.
Yeah.
It was the experiment that we did with her and Peter Rollins to show that you could put interesting conversations and people in West LA would come. And that's what gave us the credibility to start the Loft LA. Right. And so we taught, it was just so great. But one of my favorite moments is, we would Uber back and forth, right? Because a lot of us flew in, we didn't have a car. And
it is
but every
Theology
day,
Beer Camp.
yeah.
You're
And
making
every
healthy
day I would
choices.
meet somebody new. So I'd be sitting in the car with somebody and I'd be like, hey, I'm Bo. And they'd introduce himself and I'd go, why is your name familiar? And sometimes it was like Josh, who does, who comments on all the
Rethinking
stuff.
Faith
And
podcast.
yeah, Rethinking Faith. And he's so funny, in all of his sassy comments that he makes. But I knew him as a name on a screen. And so to meet him was incredible. But my favorite one is one morning I'm in the Uber from the Airbnb over, and there were like 4 Joshes there.
Yes.
Or Joshua was. And so I'm sitting next to this guy and I go, hey, I'm Bo. And he said, hey, I'm Joshua. And I said, which Josh are you? And he says, his last name. And I'm like racking my brain, like, why does that sound so familiar? And it turns out it's the guy from the Emerged podcast.
Josh Gilbert. Yeah.
Gilbert. And he has a soundboard with him and he's telling me about his plans for the game, the trivia game. And it's just funny to meet people that you're like, oh, wait, I've heard your voice before. And then to connect with them. And it was so fun. And meeting people, like Emily, who did the intro to that podcast, and she was the photographer. But like when I heard her voice, I'm like, wait, I know that voice. And it was so great to meet so many cool people, man.
Oh yeah. No, that's it's always exciting to hear. That's as someone who, like, what I thought I always wanted was to be either in a church or a classroom for the relationship part. And then, well, you know how the academic job market works. And
yes, I do.
Progressive churches large enough to be excited for me are a long ways away from family. So during lockdown, Alicia was like, Trip. So why can't you just recognize you've built something and then put the relationship energy with like the other podcasters that you're friends and kind of mentor the younger ones and put energy in the relationships with the theologians to help them, share their work to a larger area, and they can invest in that relationship and make, when you get together at camp and stuff, like the class reunion of sorts, like for the web of friendships.
Yeah.
And obviously that could have existed already. I just was so narrow focused on Trip teach systematic theology to future minister. It was like a thing I did to eventually get to a place. And then I was like, well, that ain't happening. So let's do this. So to me, when people, both like in all the surveys and stuff that people filled out after it, every time they mention like reconnecting with friends, making new ones, feeling a part of a community because they are only digitally connected where they live and stuff, that's always the exciting part.
Yeah.
When you see people that never knew each other 3 years ago running to hug each other when they see each other, that to me is just, that's what I get pumped about, though.
There was a handful of us that hung out the next day. There was like maybe 12 of us who stayed to go to church the next day. And when we saw each other between services, because I went to both the traditional service and then the contemporary service, and it was like we were all best friends. We were part of a club, right? A sorority or something. And we hadn't seen each other in forever. And it was so funny that then we got talking about the previous 3 days. And so like Paul Phillips was there and with his family, Grace and Jojo. And so I got to connect with them. And there were some folks there that I actually knew from when I lived in Portland, and I hadn't seen them in probably 3 years. And so I got to talk with them, and that was just, the whole thing was fantastic. And it was just really fun. Which brings me to my third takeaway. The level of nerdery shocked me. So I'm a nerd. I'm pretty nerdy.
You are.
But nothing compared to about 50% of the people there. The level of specificity of nerdery was impressive and sometimes intimidating. But like, when you have people in cosplay, right? There's a cosplay competition, karaoke, D&D. There were people who were experts on video games, films that I've never, like, I don't know the Alien franchise, and yet there were two people there who had entire theological projects based on the Alien franchise. You know, Leah and Ryan were in conversation about that. I mean, Bonhoeffer scholars, Hegel and Tillich scholars. I mean, there were also people there who were, you know, doing work on the ground, and so they were doing community organizing. There were folks there that were into sacred arts, but the level, I literally, Trip, as I was flying home, I was journaling a little bit, and I made a note to myself, and I said, "Hey, bud, at 51, there are some things that you've been dabbling in over the last 20 or 30 years, but there are people who live in that world and have a long history of what works and doesn't work. You might need to stop dabbling and let that stuff go and outsource it to folks who really know what they're doing and burrow down on the things that you do well." Like, it actually caused me to focus up a little bit and to say, like, I know that these are mild interests and that maybe you have a couple books on it or like a couple ideas of things you tinker with, but there are people who have burrowed so far down in it. And for me, part of it was generational. It was nice to have so many young people there who are like social media savvy. One of my favorite things that happened is we were sitting in the empty nerd room. I was sitting with my friend Rick, who is a fellow Methodist minister, and we were just having a real heart to heart. And all of a sudden we hear this commotion behind us, and we had heard them practicing out in the hallway, but they had come into the room and they were making what ended up being a viral video. April from the New Evangelicals had taught everybody like a dance and a song. And
the hot to go dance.
Yes. So Rick and I are talking and we hear this beautiful 4-part harmony, a chorus of voices break out behind us that says, HOTTOGO, you can take me hot to go. But in 4-part harmony. And then it turns out I saw the video the next day. They had hand motions and everything, and they had even recruited some of the keynote speakers.
Ilya and Pete Enns were in it. It was hilarious.
But it's just that kind of stuff that you're like, first of all, I don't know that song. Secondly, I didn't even know they were going to be recording that video. Like, I'm so far off of that social media, whatever. Like, I'm not on TikTok.
Yeah, I think what happened, Bo, is the moment we weren't youth ministers in Los Angeles, our cultural aging ramped up fast.
Absolutely.
You know, there would have been a time we would have been like, oh, yeah, this is Chapel Rowan. I mean, I know it from my daughter. But because she was singing, I was like, hey, they did a TikTok with that at camp. And I show it to her, and she's like, why didn't you do it? That's so cool. And I'm like, well... yeah, I was probably downstairs crying about Frodo.
Okay, so that brings me to another point. Like, I didn't even get to be a part of any of the Tolkien stuff because I was doing other things at the same time. I mean, it's so elaborate and multi-layered and multifaceted that, like, even stuff you're supremely interested in, you have to choose, am I going down to that breakout session or am I going to be a part of this? And if you have responsibilities, if you're recording or like, it was so much fun, and there was so much going on all the time. But so those are my 3 big takeaways: is the
Number of
just the sheer
options. Yeah.
diversity of things going on. Secondly, is connecting with old friends and meeting new friends. And I just have to give a shout out to Sarah Heath, who, both the times that she was on stage at microphone, she just does such a great job, but also behind the scenes, just recruiting and encouraging people to like participate in different things or checking in. She is just a rare gem. And I just want to say that reconnecting with her was one of the highlights of my time there. I just have, and then the third thing was the sheer level of nerdery was, I've been to a lot of conferences. I've been to a Solarize. I've been to OOZ. I've been to AAR, American Academy of Religion. I've been to denominational meetings. I've even been to Comic-Cons. This was truly fun and impressive.
Well, and we did a number of different events when we were together at Claremont, the like Big Tent stuff. We did C21 in Arizona, which has a very memorable story attached to it. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it so much. It is also the volume of work that goes into it is
you had quite a team
completely
working behind the
ridiculous.
scenes.
And
like
I just, and this because we've worked on events before. You go into it and you never know running event one if it's going to completely derail and things are going to break. And so that's there.
Happened.
And
that's
then
happened.
Like you put all this work in a year and you don't even know going in whether you're even will you make any money, break even, or lose money. And so
we've done that all.
Yeah. And I'm very glad it went really well, because I'll just say since then there's been a lot of invoices show up, and it just feels, I'm like, oh boy. Oh. So despite what I found out on Twitter, Trip is not pulling in. It's always people that'll go to events, then they see a lot of people there, and then they start harassing me, and they're like, "You're just making all this money, blah 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 blah." I was like, "I don't know," and then I was like, "No, I really don't know." Now I don't. I know. I'm not.
Now you know.
Yeah, it's it's wild.
It's a labor of love, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
All right.
Though people love it. Feel free to become members of the homebrew community, because somehow delivering things digitally does not have the same overhead as buying food and drinks for 600 people, and
there was
beds for 60.
There was
and playing.
Can we just name that there was a lot of good food and drink there?
Yeah, I Left Hand Brewing. Their West Coast IPA was delicious. And that Session Sour was yummy. And then what was it West something that had that West Coast IPA that was in the tall can? I don't know. It's black. It's a black can. Oh God. What? I was just like,
it was like Archer.
I just took it with
me.
So good. Cause but this is how busy I was. I had 7 beers over 3 days. What I felt like until the after party, I had 7 beers. And I lost weight at Theology Beer Camp. I lost weight.
You were on the move all the time, and you also had wardrobe changes.
Yeah. I'm pulling out my outfit for tonight. Tom Bombadil's going to be taking some kids trick or treating. Though they have requested that I not facilitate trick-or-treating in Tom Bombadil's character singing songs. I was told it's a little cringe.
Oh, come on.
So
you have to channel your inner Bard.
I'm going to do it probably just once, just to get eye rolls.
Okay. Can we just also give a shout out to Kristen? She has the capacity to manage 58 things at the same time and never lose her cool or get snappy or short with anyone. I mean, so many people would go to her and, interrupt because they needed something, and she just coolly handled. I could not be more impressed with her ability to
Patience.
do that.
She's got some patience.
But she also is the central hub. Like, she knows like where you can get that information and check in with this person, and right, like she knows where to send you to get what you need.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like we spent. I mean, we've already started talking about next year, but me and Kristen and Sari met every other week for 6 months, and then basically every week for the 6 leading up to it.
Whoa.
And we each had our to-do list. I archived 800 and some emails yesterday that are all the camp related things. So it is quite a production.
Yeah.
It's as scary as having a lock-in for 150 teenagers where you go.
Yes.
Oof.
Yeah.
No one's injured. No one got arrested. Hopefully no one's pregnant.
It was good. Hey, you know what I was really impressed by too is there was a map there where people put little stickers showing where they come from. Dude, there were people from almost every state, like all over the country and places all around the world.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we had that
was incredible.
I know. I kept it. I kept the map. One, because it's already a laminated map, I could reuse it. But I want to get a picture taken of it, and then use it again. Where then each year you can put pictures of where everyone's from.
Very cool.
So yeah, that was a cool addition. What's funny is like stuff gets added to our idea list at some meeting, and then sometimes we never know whose it was by the time it's happening. And so I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. And Kristen's like, you said you wanted that 9 months ago. And I'm like, wow.
You give a thumbs up to your own idea.
I was like, that's amazing. That's a great idea. And she's looking at me like, it's true.
Yeah. You know why you think that? It's yours.
Yeah. Then she told me some of the other ideas I was really insistent on early on. I had said, which I'm glad we didn't, because it rained the 1 hour we're supposed to be outside.
What was that about?
Yeah. Well, you know what that meant? A lot of people went out for dinner. So I had to spend another $3,000 on meeting the minimums for all those food trucks. And I was like, clearly I should have just bought everyone dinner.
Oh no.
Because they're like, it's raining. I don't want to go get in a line in the rain.
In fairness, it wasn't just regular rain. It was cold, straight sideways rain.
It reminded me of Scotland rain. That's what like the morning walk to school was half the days.
Oh wow.
But yeah, it was.
That was bad timing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. But what I apparently had said a long time ago was, she was like, one day you showed up in the meeting and you're like, here, write down my ideas. And it was the map. And I said, I need a popcorn machine, which we had. I love popcorn. So
you did. Yeah.
It was fun. Like I didn't have to do anything during the concert. So I'm like delivering popcorn to everyone in the.
No way.
But she was like, you also asked for during the bottle share to have a soft serve ice cream truck so people could make stout floats. And I was like, okay, that is a good idea. I'm just saying. I was like,
wow.
Because, let's say you take your little cup up there, you throw a little shot of ice cream, top it off with a barrel-aged beer. You got yourself a good time.
Amazing.
You got yourself a good time.
So what did you have, like 6 food trucks there?
Yeah. Yeah. And
it was an amazing array of a variety of food trucks.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been fine. If there wasn't rain, it would have been fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are those porta potties just sitting there.
No one used the porta potties?
I mean, I don't know why.
I did, but it was for devotional.
Yeah.
I just needed a quiet space.
And you were like, well, I know where I can hide that no one will want to see me.
That's what I did. That's true story. Hey, I want to
I
say,
just
I
want you to
also just need
note
to,
that you were passing by. I went and had a devotional in a porta potty. I just want to make a note of this, um, because we've talked a lot in our lives. At no
yeah,
point have you said anything that would make me think, Bo's like, you know, why not talk to the Lord real quick? If only there was a porta potty nearby. Because
that's right.
generally,
I don't know that
big
I've ever
bodied
done it
men
before.
don't prefer porta potties because they are just so much warmer than what's happening outside. So if you are wearing long sleeves or a jacket and stuff, and then you go in
Yeah.
there, you only have a few seconds before
Well, you know,
perspiration may start.
when porta potties are first delivered, they smell really
Yeah.
nice, right? They're
So it was
clean,
probably perfectly clean
and
for you.
and I got out of the rain. It was great. Hey, Trip, I also just want to clear the air. I forgive you, by the way.
Oh, what did I do this time?
You, I needed, so some people had flown first day, some people had flown in from the East Coast. And when you fly from the East, as you know, sometimes you got to get up like super early, like 3:30 to get to the airport
Yeah.
for your 6 o'clock flight, right? The way East Coast to West works. So there were some academics there who were really tired the first day. And God bless Mike Morrell, who had a car and agreed to drop us all off at our various locations before coming back for the cosplay
Mhm.
and the concert. He is a saint. I love that man. He has such a generous, kind heart. I honestly, reconnecting with Mike was just terrific. But we're dropping off everyone, and you asked me if I was going to come back. I don't know if you remember this, and I said no. I'm just going to go, to the Airbnb. You said you're not going to come to cosplay and the concert, and I said no. There's other evening activities and upcoming nights I'll do, and you said, my God, you're old.
Oh, yeah. Well, you just got like a particular voice, and I was like, I feel like Bo doing karaoke would be a quality moment. You got the
Uh,
nice.
it's funny. I've never done karaoke, but I practiced in the weeks leading up just in case
Justin.
I ended up on stage. It didn't go well.
Well, karaoke is not about accuracy as much as like commitment. You know, it's like you just go for it, and
Yeah.
because of kind of it's got a unique hermeneutic going on in karaoke. It's about passion, intensity, commitment, not about
Yeah.
quality. Not about quality.
It's
It's the
committed.
quality of the
I love
energy.
it.
Uh,
Hey, can I tell you about the session that I got to facilitate?
yeah.
So, thanks to you, I was able to be in that theology room because you were down the hallway for the Tolkien session, one of them.
Mhm.
And I got to sit with some of my favorite authors, Grace G. Sun Kim, Adam Clark, Jorg Rieger, and then a new friend, thank you, who does community organizing, sort of on the ground stuff, and who really contributed some good stuff to the session. But it was on the future of liberation theologies, and I knew that it would be zesty. And so you'll appreciate this. In order to set it up, because I knew that we were going to end up talking about some pretty serious stuff. I mean, anytime you're talking about liberation theology, you're talking about what are you being liberated from? And sure enough, I mean, we did talk about some pretty heavy topics ranging from racism, patriarchy, Palestine. I mean, because Grace had just gotten back from there. We did cover some heavy stuff. So I wanted to set the tone for because Homebrewed has a certain aesthetic, a certain ethos, right? There's a timbre to it. And so I wanted to set this apart from if you went to like the American Academy of Religion, what are you going to talk about? And it can be really stuffy. And so I wanted to lighten it up to start. And so I framed it in I did some stuff at the beginning that I think you would really appreciate. One is I wanted crowd feedback during the conversation. And I just invited people, but if we had been down in the chapel, the main stage, when you're down there, amen is like the highest compliment you can give, like amen, So I said, but we're not down there. So we're down here, and this is where the taps are, right? This is where the drinks are. So we're gonna be a little lighter down here. So amen is going to be our starting point. If you hear something you like, that's amen. And then we're going to go up from there. So above that was preach it.
Ooh.
And then above that was, oh shit. And, but it set a really good tone because people were like, oh, this isn't just an academic conversation, you know? And then because in the printed schedule that everybody got when they registered, I only had one name. I'm just Bo. And so I decided not to do formal introductions and give CVs and like where they're teaching. I just introduced them as Jorg, Grace, Adam,
Aaron.
and Aaron.
Yeah.
Right. And so it set like a more like a friendlier conversational tone. And I just did a couple things like that at the beginning to like let people know this is going to be a lively conversation. And it definitely was. But my two favorite parts that I've been wanting to tell you about. The first was, I made a joke at the beginning. I said, as a practical theologian, which is my field, I'm not convinced that liberation theologies have a future. You have 5 minutes each to convince me that liberation theology has a horizon and what you think it looks like. And that was really the right way to start because it gave them sort of a trajectory that they had to satisfy. And because I said, if you look up on Wikipedia, liberation theology, it definitely has a past. We all know where it started. And it has a present because it's always focused on its location.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it has a future. And so, asking them to answer a specific question was better than giving them a generic prompt. And they did a great job with it. But my favorite part was a conversation between Grace and Adam. They both, in their various ways, but Adam specifically, Grace picked up on it later when she responded to him, basically said, from the Exodus to Revelation, there is liberation is a concern in Scripture. Moses being the first liberation theologian. And Adam basically said that since all theology, that biblical theology is liberation theology, it has a future. And he tied it in with the Black church tradition and the prophetic voice. Grace picked up on that later with, her concept, and in the Korean word of Han and other concerns. But in the end, she said the same thing, that all theology done rightly is liberation theology. And it was just a powerful way for them to frame it from Moses all the way to our present time. And that, of course, it has, they basically said, if theology has a future, it is liberation theology because of the world that we live in. And man, it's just the dynamic between those two. And then with Jorg coming in with his, the way he speaks is, so lively. Like he just brings like a certain electric charge, chiming in. And it was just, it was a moment that I really am glad that I was there for. And to hear Adam's perspective and then for Grace to riff off of that was just like a dynamic that really was inspiring.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I was rather confident it would go well just because of, you facilitating it and who all's involved kind of thing. And I always love the Theology Nerd stage sessions. There's been
one of the funny things about that stage is sometimes when I would leave one session and I would come down to see what was happening in that room, I would walk in, say 10, 15 minutes late, and I would have no idea what they were talking about. It was so, specific. And I would look around everyone seems really engaged, But these aren't conversations you can walk in 15 minutes late on.
The one that was like Tillich versus Process was thoroughly entertaining because Tom Ord attempted to be argumentative, which just, he's like, well, I want to play the debate thing here. And just,
okay.
I've decided he doesn't even know how to be aggressively mean. Even his opponents were like, he's really not good at being mean. And, he kept just trying to find connection points.
It's not in his nature.
And, it was pretty entertaining. The other one at the Theology Nerd stage I did was one on Theopoetics with Ilya and Catherine Keller and Christy Whaley, and that was quite a bit of fun. Catherine had this line in it that I was just like, geez, I bet every preacher's making a note, where she talks about that the wounds of Christ and the wounds of God become the womb of new creation. And I was like, oh, come on. I was like, let me go ahead and write this down for my.
That is shocking.
Yeah. I was like, that'll preach. Wow.
The second thing that happened in my session that I really wanted to make sure I told you about is at one point I asked a question where I quoted Jorg from 12 years ago when he said at one of our sessions that we had hosted him at in Southern California. He said, in the age of Pentecostalism, especially in the global South, it is now easier to imagine raising someone from the dead than preaching good news to the poor. And then I asked the other panelists to give feedback on that quote. And it went in a direction I didn't quite expect. So Grace answered first, and then Adam followed up. And then later, when we opened it up for Q&R in the room, one of the students who was there, an emerging scholar, followed up on this and said, is it time for us? So Grace's answer was basically, I don't even know if we should be preaching good news to the poor. I'm not sure we just have a conception of what would be good news to them because we're putting it in our expectations instead of listening and empowering to hear what would be good news, for them. Adam pushed back on this. This is the part I wanted to tell you about, and said, well, hold on just real quick. He said, in the past, in the Black community, so much of the conceptualization has come from leaders of solidarity movements in the political realm, social realm, economic realm, religious realm. But now, for this generation, he says when the civil rights movement was going on, there were no Black billionaires. Maybe not even millionaires, but no billionaires. And now there are 10 Black billionaires and thousands of millionaires. So young people, when they conceptualize of what would be good news or salvation for them, they're not looking to civil rights leaders, community organizers, and religious voices. They're looking to celebrities and billionaires. And so they have reconceptualized what salvation or liberation might look like. So we can't necessarily default to listening to their perspective because they have been shaped by a culture of social media and, in the realms of music and media and monetary. We have to be careful of what we are considering liberation or salvation to be, because if we don't, then we haven't accounted for the influence of this money being salvation. And so one of the students asked, is it time for us to revisit the idea of God's preferential treatment of the poor? Should we do a power analysis and get away from calling people poor? And this is where Grace had the insight to say, yeah, because when we say the poor, it almost sounds like a static quality instead of saying what systems have led to these people being pushed to impoverishment. So we shouldn't call them the poor anymore. And it was just between Adam saying, because of the way we are socialized, especially our young people, we need to be careful of prescribing for them some sort of self-satisfied or self-fulfilling liberationer, right? And then for Grace, to acknowledge that people have been impoverished. They've been pushed there by these forces and powers and systems. And so by labeling them in an umbrella category of the poor, man, it was just like, I hope you can pull those two clips if you can find them and share them, because like this is a conversation I think going forward that is inspiring for future dialogues, both in the academy and in, a specific local context, that not calling people the poor, but those pushed to impoverishment, who have been impoverished, and also not doing that liberal thing of saying, well, like, let's listen to the person and find out what they want, but to acknowledge through a power analysis that the impoverishment that has been, cast upon them, that has inflicted them, has a systemic nature to it and isn't just about the individual themselves and maybe their lack or their deficit. Man, those are two conversations going forward. I would be more excited to be a part of that kind of a conversation than any type of a theoretical or abstract conceptualization of like a field of study that has become liberation theology.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exciting.
It was exciting.
Which I imagine what we can do is just put the whole panel put it as the episode after this. Then, I can, edit out whatever the crowd experience parts that,
Yeah, because there
don't fit in the room.
You could definitely do, like, if you did a summary and pulled out the parts where they were engaging each other's ideas, you would have enough for an episode. But yeah, because of the format, there are certain parts you're going to want to pull out, because there was a lot, like there were questions about, whether it was my framing of a question or like the sequence of who was going to go. But so if you did make a highlight reel, you put it out, you would have, if you just did where they were interacting with each other, you would have enough for an episode.
Yeah. Nice. Well, looking forward to it. I've been uploading lots of the stuff from all the different hard drives that have
that's amazing.
Everything in it.
I want to give a shout out to Noah, who ran the sound in that room. That was a tricky room to manage the sound. It was echoey and the tech was a little glitchy. He never lost his cool and he did a great job.
Yeah, the whatever the Wi-Fi or something, or the signal for some of those mics kept going out.
Yep.
And it turned into like where you're having to pass around and and he had like checked it all before. It was like, maybe there's that many people in the room made the signal worse, or I don't know what it was.
Oh, interesting.
It had all worked, and then we're sitting there and I'm like, oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah. When I first got to this church, we had the same problem, which we would do we would work on it all week. We would boot it up on Sunday morning. Everything would be great. But we figured out it's when people would show up with their cell phones that they were draining the bandwidth. And then that's why during the service, we always had glitches that we didn't experience at all during the week.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just really glad you got to come. and
Thank you.
I am looking forward to picking your brain, and so you can have more fun next year, and you'll get to see people, all the new people you met,
I
showing back
know.
up. It's going to
I
be
made some.
a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
And you haven't said where it's going to be yet.
no, we're talking to a number of different locations, as you can imagine. There's a lot of people like the idea of it, and then you're like, okay, but just we really need clarity here, and then you never know what your church board's going to say when you
That's
show up and go,
true.
all right, so imagine this place with a lot more people in it than normal. Day drinking in the sanctuary.
Oh, Lordy.
Yeah, it is yeah, well, we'll see. Which, if any of you listening are like, that's nothing, and we just happen to be next to a major airport, holler. So
Can I just stress that how much that major airport is important? Because I actually thought of some locations that I think would work, but not for that many people flying in.
yeah, and it is very much like, there's always a few more people when it's local, from maybe the host church or people that wouldn't have flown but could drive. But yeah, people, like you saw on the map, come from everywhere. So
yeah,
when it's near an airport and it's one that is big enough that tickets aren't crazy expensive, it really helps.
So I just want to say, I don't know if I get a vote, but I just want to say I know a lot of people are pulling for Minnesota as next year's location.
I know that Mason walked around telling people it is in Minnesota next year. He did it last year at camp too. He's like, next year's in Minneapolis. And I'm like, oh, thanks, Mason.
But I just want to say that I'm pulling for the Pacific Northwest because there are some friends of mine who don't fly that I know would take the train.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I get a vote, and I could see the upside of Minnesota, but
I know, but Seattle and Portland are both very high on the homebrewed city list. So
nice.
I'm sure no one's surprised. They were like,
no,
if you were to go in your head of like cities, there's probably a lot of people who listen to homebrewed Christianity.
Yes.
I mean, LA's always number one because there's a bunch of people who are there so long, but LA people move places too. So,
hey Trip, I have a confession. I'm trying to do a new thing that I drink a big glass of water for every cup of coffee I drink.
Oh, congratulations.
And unfortunately, my physiology is overtaking my spirituality at this moment. And
well, it's all good. We can wrap up the recording part, then go to the restroom and connect. But so I think what's going to happen, listener, is that next in the feed, you'll get the highlight reel of the liberation session.
Oh,
so yes, they'll be all pumped about it. We talked about camp, and then I'll try to release them right back to back so you can just go listen. Like I'll put them out at the same time, but separate episodes. Yeah. So later in life, you don't need to go hear what happened at camp, but that conversation can stand on its own.
And Trip, do we want feedback on that, or do we just want people to listen?
Whatever. They can give you feedback. I don't know what happened yet. All I know is what you told me. You could be making the whole thing up. Right. I might get in there and edit, Bo, and you're like, hey, I know we're all theoretically friends with Trip, but what's his growing edge? And could we talk about it in public? See, I don't,
funny. Can you imagine if I just imagined a dialogue between those panelists in my head? I'm sure I could write a whole script.
Yeah. We could upload all their previous podcast appearances, have AI do it, and clone their voices. And
Trip, I am HOTTOGO.
Yeah. I was about to make a joke that I would edit out. So, all right. I'll see you in a second, Bo. And listeners, we'll see you soon too.